Why do so many farmers feel that they still have to use pesticides, and do they not know how persistent they are in the environment?
Well, they're right. They do have to. I mean, if they are practicing as my cousin does, growing vast acres, thousands of acres of corn and soybeans, there's just no alternative. You can't do that without chemicals. And so the farmers are, not the people I blame here. There's a whole system that's been created that farmers are part of that has turned corn and soy into these commodity crops that are grown in gargantuan amounts to either be turned into ethanol or picked apart into high fructose corn syrup or trans fats or turned into ethanol or given over to animal feed. So essentially the part of the world where I come from in the Midwest is the starting point of a food chain that ends up in meat and snack food. And so if we're going to practice a form of, a food delivery system like that, then we're giving farmers no choice to opt out of the chemical treadmill. So, I think that therefore there's a psychological impetus for farmers to turn away from some of the evidence for harm because if you know something but you can't do anything about it and don't have agency over, you can't prevent yourself or your family or your groundwater or your air from being exposed, then why bother to know? So there's a kind of an intense need, I think, to turn away from some of the evidence for harm in farm countries, and that's a difficult place for me as an author and a biologist to begin when I go there and do kind of public education around these issues, and so I often start in places that my audiences don't expect. So, for example, in areas where I know right to life feelings run very high, I bring in the evidence for the links between pesticide exposure and pregnancy loss. In other words, some of these pesticides, including a common one called methoxychloroquine, have the ability to interfere with the implantation of the embryo in the uterus because of its ability to interfere with hormonal signals. And so that means that abortion means more than a woman entering a Planned Parenthood clinic and terminating a pregnancy. We can agree or disagree on whether women should have that agency, but maybe we could all agree, and that's what I tell these farmers, that any chemical that has the power to extinguish a human pregnancy that's in our agricultural system, we really might want to look at that.
Right.
And that message is a good starting point for some communities who have a value system that really, holds fetal life. The sanctity of fetal life is a very, high values. And so
that's a good point.
I start with that.
Let's talk a little bit about some good news and tell us which politicians and organizations have been at the forefront when it comes to stopping environmental pollution. Is there anyone working on a green chemistry initiative, for example?
There's a lot going on. Yes, California has its green chemistry initiative, and it is inspired by what's happened across the Atlantic Ocean in the European Union. And very briefly, the nation states of the European Union have decided to scrap their old method of regulating toxic chemicals, which was very similar to ours, and embrace a whole new approach that is based on the precautionary principle, meaning that chemicals have to be demonstrated safe before they're allowed to be marketed, including old chemicals that have had access to markets maybe for decades are now being hauled into the lab and tested. And if they're not safe, then there's a whole series of decisions that are made, but it can ultimately lead to a requirement to find a non-toxic substitute. And so inspired by that, California has kind of embarked on its own green chemistry initiative, and green chemistry and green engineering in other states, including Massachusetts, is leaping forward. So it's my great hope that someday we'll just drop the word green, and the green chemistry and green engineering will simply become chemistry and engineering. Just that'll be the way we do things. We're not there yet, but I'm really inspired by what I'm seeing now in some of the more progressive engineering and chemistry departments that had historically never looked to see what the toxic byproducts were of synthesizing chemicals, and are now doing this kind of full cost accounting, and kind of going back to the drawing board. It's very exciting.
That's great. Now, on a personal level, are there things that you do to lessen your own risk? For example, do you eat organic and avoid certain cosmetics or personal care products?
I probably do less than you think, because I am interested really in an upstream approach. I don't think you can move safely through a toxic world. You can't opt out of the water cycle, for example, and so if your water is contaminated, you can drink all the bottled water you want from Fiji or France, and burn all that fossil fuel to bring the water to you. Water is heavy; it weighs 8 pounds a gallon, so it requires a lot of fossil fuel to travel. But in fact, most of our exposure from contaminants in drinking water come from bathing and showering. So every time you turn on the shower, you get an exposure equivalent of drinking half a gallon of tap water.
Right. Now you mentioned taking a bath was even worse.
Taking a bath is worse. Flushing your toilet is, you create turbulence, and chemical contaminants go right into your air. Say when you turn on the dishwasher, turn on your washing machine. And so if you're worried about chemical contaminants in water, the solution is to find out what's threatening your watershed, where you live, and do something about it.
So not just get a water filter in your whole house filter, let's say, because it's...
Well, yeah, I mean, we're going to all be our own regulatory agencies.
Right.
I mean, at some point you have to throw your water filter away after it gets all filled up with all those carcinogens you don't want in your own body. And where are you going to put it? In somebody else's landfill?
No,
that's
a
just
good
playing
point.
a shell game with waste, and I'm not interested in doing that. So, I'm far more interested in doing toxics reform, so I can not just protect my own 2 children, but the whole generation of children of which they're part.
So how can people... how can people get involved? The average person listening to this show, how can they make a difference in changing their watershed, for example? It seems like a huge undertaking.
I don't know the answer to that, and I never tell people what to do. What I try to do is to let people know what I'm doing, show them the evidence for harm, and invite them to do something, right? I mean, we're all sort of musicians in a great human orchestra here, and I often tell my audiences, it really is now time to play the Save the World Symphony. I don't know what instrument you hold, but you need to find out what it is and play it as well as you can in concert with other people. And so if you're interested in food, there's the ability to source with local organic farmers. If you're interested in fashion, take on the dry cleaning industry. My daughter, as an 11-year-old, is interested in her right to non-toxic nail polish. There's a whole group of, radical middle school girls who are trying to insist that personal care products are as toxic-free as their counterparts in Europe get to enjoy. I've worked with professional football teams, professional golfers, and college football teams who are interested in getting pesticides off of putting greens and playing fields.
That's
a
huge source of
whatever your interest is, there's a role for you to play. I don't know what that is, but I think the trick here is to find something that you have a passion for and make that your entree point, because none of us can do it all. And this idea that every little bit counts is really not true. It just isn't. And we might as well just stop being deluded about that. Dutifully carrying your recyclables out to the curb every week is not going to prevent the Gulf Stream from collapsing. It's just not. And so it's a lot more than just using green cleaners in your home. So it is true. I buy all organic food from my family. I cook for my family 365 days of the year, even though I travel 100 days of the year. And I do that because I have a chest freezer and a crock pot. And I learned to cook. I only have baking soda and vinegar to clean my house, and I don't have a clothes dryer. I hang everything up. I only have a push mower and so forth. But I do that not because I think that that's going to save the planet. I do that because it's a kind of a sacred obligation on my part to remind myself that that we have to enact our larger beliefs. And I need also to show my kids, because my kids don't see me when I'm flying around to, do a briefing at Congress or work on some kind of political initiative. So they need to see me out there pushing the real mower around in the yard and hanging my clothes up.
Right, be a role model.
I do that for
Sure.
different reasons.
Yes,
yeah,
I
and
understand.
also because I want to direct my food dollars toward farmers who aren't broadcast spraying toxic chemicals into the environment, who have figured out a way to step off the toxic treadmill. I want to support them. I mean, we have to buy food anyway, so why not buy that food?
Right. Now, Sandra, I'm sorry, we're out of time, but just tell our listeners where they can get hold of your book, Living Downstream, and also your film. Is it out? The documentary, has it come out yet?
It is. I'm pleased to say it is. Yeah, it's made the circuit now, kind of in film festivals, and is enjoying screenings in theaters. And anyone who's interested in finding out where it's being screened can go to livingdownstream.com. In the fall, the film will be available as a DVD, and the filmmaker and I are busy putting together supplemental materials for people who want to use the film to organize their community or show in their church or their school and so forth.